Hi. For this assignment, I am focusing on the 5 types of interpersonal relationships within the Jamaican culture and how they are similar and or different from my own African American culture. To gather my research, I have interviewed Carol Levy, a Jamaican mother of 2 who has been married for 24 years and comes from a large, close-knit family. Carol, originally from Montego Bay, Jamaica, and her family have only lived in the United States for the past 5 years, after relocating from Canada, of which they lived for 7 years. They relocated to the U.S. for her husband's job and their children's higher education. Carol and I worked together at Home Depot corporate office as executive assistants. I also used Intercultural Competence textbook by Lutstick and Koister, along with www.massgeneral.org and other websites. The first type of interpersonal relationship is stranger. In the U.S., according to Lustig and Koester, there is a strong distinction between strangers and non-strangers. Specifically noted is the fact that young children are taught to fear strangers. Carol said that this holds true in the Jamaican culture as well. She confirmed my research that although Jamaican people are very friendly people, they are not very trusting people. One must prove their trustworthiness to them, and until so, are considered strangers. The second type of interpersonal relationship, no, I'll go back just a little bit to strangers, and I will say that in the African American culture, people, if you're just on the street, if you're unknown, you are strangers, and children are taught to fear strangers, etc., etc. The second type of interpersonal relationship is acquaintance. According to Lustig and Koister, an acquaintance is someone you know but casually. One point that stuck out in the text to me was that it is acceptable in the European American culture for an acquaintance to ask about one's wife. However, in the United Arab Emirates culture, it would be a quote major breach of social etiquette to do so, end quote. In the African American culture, this falls in a gray area. It depends on how close of an acquaintance one is to ask more than a simple question as how one's family is doing. A simple response could be that they are well. However, it is not acceptable to ask more probing questions man to man of another man's wife. Um, this also holds true in the Jamaican culture. Additionally, in the Jamaican culture, quote, until a personal relationship has been established, people are addressed by their honorific title, Mr., Mrs., Miss, and their surname, for example, Mrs. Levy or Mr. Levy, until one becomes more than until one is invited to use their first name. Excuse me. Um, Yes, and it goes on to say, quote, one should always wait until they are invited before using someone's first name. And this came from www.quintessentials.co.uk. In the African American culture, this can vary. Typically, elders are always given a respect of Mr. or Mrs., even when used with their first name. The next type of interpersonal relationship is a friend. In the Jamaican culture, close friends are considered family. This mirrors the African American culture. Oftentimes, in the African American culture, friends are considered more like family sometimes than blood relatives are. In the Jamaican culture, because they are not very trusting people, Friendships take time to cultivate. However, when they do, the bond is typically for a lifetime. Carol and her best friend have been friends for 45 years, since they were born, as their mothers are best friends. Likewise, Carol's husband and his best friend have been best buds for over 30 years. And keeping with this tradition, their children are best friends. Before her death, my first best friend and I were friends for 20 years. My current best friend and I have been BFFs for going on 8 years. So we typically can be friends in the African American culture for a very long time as well. Lustig and Koester reference the Thailand culture and the fact that a friend is accepted completely or not at all. I asked Carol if Jamaicans are like this, and she said that they are. Comparing this to the African American culture, I can't say that this is culture wide. However, I am like that. I know instantly if I like you or not, and if I don't want to have anything to do with you. Um, so maybe I have a little tie in you. Lustig and Koester also refer to the fact that in the African American culture, once people become close friends, they feel that they should be able to confront and criticize one another. I know for a fact that this is a true cultural trait as I go through this with my best friend all the time. According to Carol, this holds true in the Jamaican culture as well. Everyone is in everyone else's business. The next type of interpersonal relationship is romantic partners slash marriage. In the video titled Relationships in Intercultural Settings, the Indian woman featured in the video spoke about her arranged marriage. I asked Carol if arranged marriages are a common practice in the Jamaican culture, and she replied no, that they are not. Arranged marriages are also not common practice among African Americans. However, going back to my great great grandmother and being of the Creole descent, she participated in um, not so much arranged marriages, but this was back when fair skinned passe blanc, um, quote unquote, passerine Creole, passport white Creole, um, black women were kept by white men, and this was an arrangement type thing. This no longer is true, but it is something that culturally did happen. Going back to my writing, um, so arranged marriages are not common practice in Jamaica nor in African American cultures. African American and Jamaicans alike are allowed to date whomever they choose. Casual dating is acceptable, and similarly, children out of wedlock is socially accepted. Interestingly, according to www.massjournal.org, quote, marriage is less common in Jamaica than other countries. Couples often wait until their children are grown before marrying. This explains why statistically Jamaicans only had a 0.9% divorce rate in 2010, and this comes from divorcescience.org, compiled by Robert Hughes Jr. And this would be because no one is getting married. It's also very, very expensive to get married in Jamaica. They have multiple ceremonies, multiple parties. The celebration lasts for days and it can be very expensive. Um, the marital rate among Americans is low, about 22%, according to 2010 Census Bureau. Um, I guess what I do is compare. I also asked if it was socially acceptable to marry outside of the Jamaican race. She said that although it is becoming, no, let me go back. It's actually the divorce rate amongst African Americans is about 22%. Um, so going back, I also asked if it was socially acceptable to marry outside of the Jamaican race. She said that although it is becoming more acceptable, it is not common practice. Once upon a time, Jamaicans only married Jamaicans, but this tradition is going by the wayside. It is, and it has been for quite some time, socially acceptable for African Americans to marry outside their race. Unfortunately, what is not acceptable and actually very taboo is same sex relationships, especially homosexual relationships in the Jamaican culture. It is not accepted or even talked about. And a family um, will disown an openly gay male family member. African Americans are more accepting of same sex relationships. Finally, family is the last type of interpersonal relationship. Lusting, lustig in coister references the Latino and Indian culture where extended family is very important. This is very true in the Jamaican culture. According to www.massjournal.org, quote, Jamaicans adore children. Women often raise children alone or in extended families. However, whatever the arrangement, relatives and neighbors are expected to help with child care in the Jamaican community. End quote. Carol confirmed this. She did not work until her youngest child went to high school. This varies in the African American culture. I believe economic factors play a large role in whether or not an African American mother stays home to raise the children or not. But depending on the dynamics of an individual family, everyone is has a hand in raising the children. Jamaicans are a very close knit family. Sunday dinners and holidays are family time. This is also very true in the African American culture. The thing I miss most about no longer living in New Orleans with my extended family is Sundays. Every Sunday, my immediate family would go to church with my father's family and then to my grandmother's house for Sunday dinner, and then to my mother in law's house for dessert or just to spend time. For major holidays, it wasn't uncommon for us to visit as many as 6 to 8 different family households to celebrate. You had to get in to everyone's house, every auntie's house, or else it was a problem. Similarly, Jamaicans revere Sundays and holidays as family time. This is time spent catching up on each other's lives. Carol said that she cooks traditional Jamaican food every Sunday for her family and friends who visit her home. Although I am no longer near my extended family, it is still very important to me to cook a big Sunday dinner for my family and friends. Sundays just wouldn't be Sunday without it. And I hope you enjoyed my research on the 5 different types of interpersonal relationships as compared to the Jamaican and African American cultures.